So, I'm going to be talking about fantasy again, but I will be using historical examples for the concept which I'm going to talk about. So, technically, I'm not doing fantasy twice in a row, but because, history and stuff will actually be in this video. Actual proper medieval history, not the history of Dungeons and Dragons like in last week's video. And it's kind of a response to an older Lindy Beige video called The Strange Appeal of Orphanhood, where he talks about how he thinks that a lot of sort of fantasy RPG characters and such will have tragic backstories where their parents were killed or their village destroyed or etc., 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 so that, you never have a run-in with your uncle or your parents when you're out adventuring. And yes, that is true, but I propose it's actually possibly something else, which is your adventurers should have to go adventuring. They have to be, effectively outlaws to do this, because if not, you could always go to the law. So in Celtic examples, really up until the Viking Age, the law code changed a bit after the Viking Age in Ireland, and I don't know if this is still part of the post-Viking age, is everyone had the right to a fair trial by judges. So, if somebody, nicked your stuff, then you could go to a judge and say, hey, he nicked my stuff, I want a trial, and then there's a trial, and possibly you get, some sort of fine for him nicking your stuff, or you get your stuff back, and a fine, something happens. You don't pull out your sword and start hacking at your opponent, you go to a court of law. And same thing with just about any ancient culture had at least some sort of protection to its citizenry. Rome famously had its law codes where every Roman citizen had the right to a fair trial. They couldn't be tortured until they'd been found guilty. Rome had a very extensive law code, so if, there's the evil duke who's, trying to kill you and the rest of your adventuring party, you should have to face the Duke. You shouldn't just be able to say, yeah, well, I'm a Roman citizen, and, dear Senator so-and-so, this evil Duke is bothering me. You shouldn't be allowed to do this. And then the Duke gets a letter, hey, he's totally a Roman citizen. He's from Galatia. You can't torture him because that's illegal. That's not a fun, riveting adventure. That's, a series of letters. It's, it's not how an adventuring party should work. Likewise, Julius Caesar was famously for his time, it's a little bit of an interesting factoid that most people don't know about today, he was captured by pirates for a time, when he was, I want to say he was decently young, maybe a teenager, but I'm not quite sure. He was captured by pirates, and eventually he escaped from the pirates, and he just went back to Rome and said, hey, I'm a noble, I'm a Roman citizen, I come from a noble family. Those pirates weren't very nice to me, so they gave him a huge sort of Roman army to go and kill those pirates with the entire force of Rome behind his back. That's not a thrilling adventure. That's, having a bunch of other soldiers go and do the work and say, hey, we found the pirates, chop their heads off because they were mean to you. You want to force your players to actually solve the problems. If there's a bandit that's blocking the way to the next town they need to go, they should go and fight the bandits or sneak around the bandits. They should handle the problem themselves. Whereas if it's an actual, if it's, a real setting and they have legal protections that anyone would have, they could just go back to the city they were just at and say, hey, so we're a member of your city and there's these bandits on the roads and they're stopping us, sort it out, because you're the king and that's your job. So the king sends a bunch of his knights and they clear out the bandits, then you continue on your way. It's not an exciting story. You should fight the bandits. And there's no reason to do that unless, as long as you have the legal protections anyone at the time would have. So you have to have a destroyed village or a ruined family or something, because if not, you have those protections. You need to remove those protections. They don't have a king to go to because their city's destroyed. They don't have legal protections because they have no clan to stand up for them. You make them outlaws so that they can, go and sort their problems out themselves, fight the evil duke, and, take out the bandits and kill the pirates themselves, not just go whine to the king, people were mean to me, soldiers, go solve it. That also means that, your soldiers, or, your adventurers, don't have to listen to the law either. So, just as any Roman citizen had rights, and, any Celtic peasant had rights, the kings had rights and responsibilities as well. And, the senators of Rome had rights and responsibilities. Everyone had rights. So, there's a few Viking sagas, which I can't remember which ones now, where a group of people go to one guy's house and goes, we think you did the crime, and we're gonna, fight you about it. And he goes, yeah, well, do you guys have a warrant? And they're like, oh, no, we don't have a warrant. And that's it. They just sort of bicker at each other for a while. We can't do anything because you don't have a warrant. He has the right to not have a bunch of random wandering adventurers go searching for his shack. He has legal protections against that. And if you're not an outlaw, you have to follow those rules, or you will be an outlaw. You have to, follow those same societies. But if you're already an outlaw, if you're not a member of the state, if you don't have protections, if you don't have a clan, if you're desperate, you have to make it so there's, you have no reason to respect this person's warrant. So you say, you have a warrant, and you just say, no, but you can't make us more of an outlaw, and we have swords, so we're going to settle this anyways. It prevents both your party and whoever the villain is from just settling things out in a court of law, which was what would have happened realistically in, ancient and medieval times. You didn't just get a bunch of swords and biff each other up a bit. You went to some sort of judge or king or your other ruler to settle disputes. And if there's some big looming threat, you didn't, go buy a sword from the local blacksmith and go solve it. You went to the king and said, hey, you have a bunch of soldiers, go solve this threat. So you need to have that orphanhood, that desperation, that not having a family to go to, so that, your adventuring party has to solve it yourself. They need to be outlaws because outlaws are the only people who would go and do the fighting themselves rather than, going to your local king and saying, hey, there's this problem and it's your job to not have bandits around.